All right, let's bring in Senator Lindsey Graham to talk about that. Senator, what's the state of law enforcement in this country since the killing of George Floyd last week?
Well, it's pretty much under siege by liberal politicians. Don't seem to be very supportive of our cops in places where the police are getting beat up and run over. But there's something I want you to think about. Those numbers are compelling. But Tim Scott is a dear friend of mine. He's an African-American Republican senator from South Carolina. He's been stopped 6 or 7 times on Capitol Hill. I've never been stopped. If you go and talk to your African-American friends, they will tell you that they tell young African-American men, teenagers and young adults, if the cops stop you, keep your hands on the wheel, don't reach for the glove compartment, say yes sir and no sir. So I've come to believe that young black men, rightly or wrongly, perceive the police to be a threat when many times they're not. But we've got to deal with that problem. And if we don't be honest with the problem, then we're never going to make progress.
Right. I just don't think destroying Fifth Avenue in Manhattan is the way to do it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. As a matter of fact, it's the wrong way to do it.
Right. We can't get that conversation when the cops are sitting there with riot shields trying to rationalize how to crack down and bring calm back to every major city in this country. So your point's well taken, though. It's going to be happening with dialogue with law enforcement itself. But right now, they can't get ahead of this violence that is destroying this country. Now, talk about destroying the country. That's what General Mattis thinks the president is doing, the former Secretary of Defense, now retired, who's going to keep his silence. But in The Atlantic, he writes, Donald Trump is the first president of my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people, does not even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us. He said he joined the military 50 years ago. He swore an oath to defend the Constitution. Never did I dream that troops would be doing the same oath would be ordered to, under any circumstance, to violate their constitutional rights. He's talking about possibly using military troops to bring calm to our cities. Where do you stand here?
Well, number one, General Mattis has the right to express himself above all others in many ways because he served the country over a long period of time, put himself at risk for the nation. I admire his service to the nation. But the one thing I would tell General Mattis is that you don't quite understand that from the time President Trump wakes up till he goes to bed, there's an effort to destroy his presidency, that George H.W. Bush, 41, used the military to support the police in Los Angeles after the Rodney King verdict. The Insurrection Act has been used, but it's been sparingly used. Nobody wants to send active duty troops into American cities unless they're invited and unless they're absolutely necessary. But I would say that Governor Cuomo should have called out the National Guard early on. And I would ask General Mattis to look at the behavior of the politicians in these cities and see if you can find fault with them. It is so fashionable to blame President Trump for every wrong in America. And he can be a handful. And can he do better? Yes. But the problems we have in America today weren't caused by Donald Trump. And hopefully he can help the nation heal some of these problems.
Yeah, I believe there was Baltimore. I don't think you can blame with the siege in Baltimore. I don't think you can blame Freddie Gray on President Trump. I'm not sure if people want to.
Politics.
And what about Ferguson? Yeah.
Well, I can go, what about this and what about 1968? The problem, I've tried to be honest with you, African-American men, when they see a cop car behind them, have a different view than when I see a cop car behind me. I don't worry about getting beat up by the cops. I worry, did I speed? What did I do wrong? There's a perception out there over time.
I hear you.
If you're a young African-American male, you got to watch it with the cops, and we need to get to the bottom of that. Community policing can help solve that. There's no reason to beat up a cop or riot or burn down buildings to try to make America a better place. You make America a better place by having a conversation and take constructive actions. To General Mattis, I think you're missing something here, my friend. You're missing the fact that the liberal media has taken every event in the last 3.5 years and laid it at the president's feet. I'm not saying he's blameless, but I am saying that you're buying into a narrative that I think is, quite frankly, unfair.
Right, and let's pivot to what you did yesterday around 10 o'clock. You spoke to Rod Rosenstein. What did you get from that conversation? What do you want the American people who missed it to glean from it?
Well, I got that nobody on the Democratic side gives a damn about this. They asked me and Grassley and Senator Tillis to support legislation to make sure that Mueller could not be fired except without cause, to investigate everything Trump. For 2.5 years, everything Trump, his family, his businesses were looked at by Mueller. And what have we learned? Rod Horowitz, the Inspector General, told us that the people in charge of the Mueller investigation manipulated evidence, withheld exculpatory information from the court, and got court warrants against Carter Page illegally. They were reprimanded by the FISA court. General Flynn's case was recommended to be dropped on January the 4th because there was no evidence he was colluding with the Russians, and Comey and Obama kept it going. So here's what I think. I think the Democratic Party is the one who colluded with the Russians. I think that Christopher Steele was paid for by the Democratic Party, a former British agent. He went to got a Russian subsource who was connected to the Russian intelligence community. They created a document against Donald Trump. There's a bunch of lies and a bunch of garbage, and they got the FISA court to use that document to issue a warrant 4 times against Carter Page. And Rosenstein said, if I knew all this then, I wouldn't have signed the warrant. If I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have signed the warrant. And oh, by the way, now that I know all this, there was no reason to suspect Flynn, Carter Page, or Papadopoulos were working with the Russians. If that's the case, why did it take 2.5 years? To my Democratic colleagues, the rule of law can't be a tool to be used for your purposes. It can't be a tool to be used for partisan purposes. It's got to apply to both parties. And I'm hoping at least there'll be some interest by the Democratic Party of trying to explain to the American people how Carter Page's life was turned upside down, how the FBI and the Department of Justice could lie to the court over and over, and have some interest in finding out how it happened and stopping it.
Senator Lindsey Graham, thanks so much. We'll look forward to the next chapter as we try to unwind this, and we will be paying attention. Appreciate it.